This customer brings to me a beautiful gemstone, a kind of a rare ruby in an odd shape. This was left to her by her relatives, and I think most of them were no longer with us. And it had always been carried in that little bag that was shaped like the stone and the same color of the stone. It meant a lot to her. Because of this particular cut, the light needed to come up through it, and that kind of started the design. And I'm going to proceed to map out a wax pattern. This is just a bulk wax that's going to be cut in just a large shape in order to start the project. I want to scribe the wax in order to give me a general idea how the ring's going to look. The shaping of the ring is determined by the stone. I wanted to leave some light under the stone in order to illuminate the stone because it was a peculiar cut. The idea behind this design was to give this ring a handmade, kind of an old world creation, almost as though this was designed in the 17th century. The wax process kind of takes a life of its own during the sculpting of the wax. Somehow you'll make a certain line, and if the line's appealing to you, it'll also create another line. And then I start thinking into the future of the processes like sandblasting, high polishes, textures, all these things that are going to be on this ring when it's completed. And I see that, start picturing that in the wax. There's a certain point where you get lost. Time and surroundings don't matter anymore, and time will go by. I'll look up and it'll be 2 o'clock in the morning. But once the wax is completed, you do your best not to damage the wax because the wax is very fragile. And the wax pattern is then presented to the customer, and that way the customer gets a general idea of how it looks, and if my vision was their vision. And then I proceed into the casting process. It's actually the lost wax process, so the wax does become the ring in a sort of way. Here's where you encase it, a flask. From there, you're able to pour plaster into the flask. You have to mix up the plaster with a water powder material. After being mixed from water to powder, the bubbles need to be removed from it so you don't leave any bubbles on your wax. And that's this process here, which is the debubbleizing. You then pour the plaster over the wax. The wax is very brittle and fragile once it's thinly carved like that. So you need to be very cautious of any pressure put on it. And then you remove bubbles again because you've just created bubbles by pouring it. You see there's bubbles rising up from the plaster. Then I realized, okay, wax is completed, plaster's hardening. The next process is the metal process. This was 18 karat yellow gold. Part of my thinking with that design was to use a pure metal to give it a real old feel. And not only that, 18 karat gold has a certain glow about it that just makes it look like it was found in the earth. The wax is encased in plaster, goes into the oven, and the oven goes from 200 degrees to 800 degrees to 1200 degrees back to 800 degrees. And then the wax then slowly evaporates out of the plaster. The wax is burnt out, and the flask is then put into a centrifugal caster. The centrifugal caster has a crucible connected to it to where I have a place to actually melt the metal. There's an alloy and a gold, and the two are mixed. It's a high volume of heat that melts the metal. Not too fast and not too slow. The centrifugal force then throws the metal into the flask, which is the cavity that was left from the wax. Now you can see the metal is hot, starting to dry at this point, and I let it set to dry 15-20 minutes, and then you want to quench the metal to remove the plaster. The rough casting is then revealed. This is an exciting process. 99% of the time I can get to this point regularly. It's just, there's always that doubt that something did not go right. So I was really happy with this.